Let's talk about the debrief that happened afterwards.
Yes.
What happened when you got back to your command?
So when we got back onto the ship, we ended up returning our weapons to the armory, went to our berthing, put our gear away, went back to the flight deck. There was this admiral there. I'd never seen him before. I don't know who he is. But it's just very out of place. He gave a debrief saying, hey, this was good that you guys are doing for these people, which I agree with. But I have no idea who he was. But, I've been on 6 ships, did several humanitarian operations, and not once have I ever seen an admiral on any of them. And this was minor compared to the one in 2011 we did with Fukushima and that natural disaster. Never seen an admiral with that, right? So it's just very out of place. So we went to, after we concluded this operation, we ended up docking in Subic Bay for some liberty. It was at least like 4 days. So the people that we encountered during that event didn't even bother to take my camera or anything. It was in my dump pouch, but it was small enough, so I don't know why they wouldn't have searched it, but they missed it, right? So here I am the whole time thinking like, fucking A, I've got something. I'm not fucking crazy, and neither of us are crazy. Like, we've got something that actually backs up if we were to tell anybody about this, and we can show them pictures of it off of a camera and not something like a computer screen where they can doctor it. Well, I spoke too soon, because when we ended up going out that first day, we came back to report back to the ship, and I saw my camera on my rack. And the memory card was out of it, and it was a big memory card. And the battery was out of it. And I just see the camera sitting. I'm like, what the fuck? So I checked my locker. It was secure because that's where I had it. And I had some stuff on top of the camera in there, in my locker that were on top of the camera. And I had another battery in there, so I took that battery and I put it in there, and it wouldn't even turn the fuck on. And I had some people reach out to me that said, if you had that camera still to this day, that they could do some data retrieval and maybe be able to pick it up. I'm like, but I don't have that camera. I tossed it because the fact that it wouldn't even turn on, it wouldn't do anything. I'm like, fuck, it's just a paperweight. And of course, 2009, you're not thinking of anything with forensics, where they could do something. There was people actually willing to do that, which is great. So somewhere out there, somebody's got this footage. Somebody's got that tape, because that's the reason why they took it. And fun fact is that the other 5 Marines that were with me, they had their phones taken.
Did you look at the pictures before? Did you have a chance to look at the pictures? I know I took pictures and videos of it because I saw the record thing, and I actually can snap the photos, and you can see like it blink. That's one way to describe it. So I knew for a fact. But you didn't go back and review them? Okay.
No. Nope.
Why not?
One, I didn't see it, want anybody to see.
Okay.
Just for that reason. It was just something to keep, if anybody doesn't know about it, then if I start telling people, then obviously there's things that may happen. Mm-hmm. And of course it did happen regardless, because as soon as we're out in town, all these people, I don't know who it was who did this, by the way, but they didn't even cut my lock. They popped it off somehow because my lock was still intact. So these guys obviously know how to do it, and I don't know who it was, but all of a sudden the other Marines had their stuff taken too. And anybody in the platoon, they didn't have any of their stuff touched. It was only us that were there.
Did they take anything else?
No. Nope. So after we get done with that, we end up going back to Okinawa, right? And this was a regular normal day. It's probably fast forward a month after we end up getting back. All of a sudden, a duty Marine knocks on my door and says, you need to report up to the CP. I'm like, roger that. So I get my cover, run downstairs, run over, and there's nobody there. I'm like, well, this is fucking weird. And all of a sudden, I go inside, and there's this big opening in his office, and then they have these little offices that have these doors that you can walk into. So all of a sudden, I'm greeted by somebody in Air Force dress blues, and he didn't have a cover on, but he had salt and pepper hair, white complexion, older gentleman. He didn't have a name tag on his uniform, which, come to find out, Air Force regulation states that you have to have a name tag on your uniforms. Marine Corps, we don't do that unless it's our camouflage, or if you're a drill instructor or some kind of instructor or some sort of billet that requires you to do that. So he calls me over, and I go over, give him the proper greeting of the day, and then he tells me, go ahead and sit down over here in this office. So I sit down, and he doesn't even bother to sit down. He just says,
you, though? Wasn't the other 5 Marines?
No, they end up having the same thing happen, but this guy did it separately.
It's all individual?
Yes.
Okay.
It wasn't all together. So he told us, again, with what you guys saw, you're not allowed to report this. You're not allowed to talk about it to your family, not to your chain of command. I don't care if a general even asks you. You can go to prison for this. You could be executed. And if you want to chance that, by all means, but you need to sign this. So I take the paper and I look at it, and it's a non-disclosure agreement. The only 2 things I can recall to this day is that it said TSSCI, and it said Indonesia. There's only things I could recall. But I skimmed through it and I fucking signed it because here I am thinking, okay, we're just going to forget about this whole fucking ordeal. And yet this is getting thrown in our face, and here's somebody threatening our fucking lives here with, imprisonment, death, things like that, if we're to talk about this.
Did you ask him any questions?
I tried to ask him who he was, and he didn't say anything. There's some speculation going on about this because people who know about this, whether it's other whistleblowers and other people who have came forward previously, have said that these guys have the ability to impersonate or even play off as their military officials or anybody for that matter in the government to try to extract information to see what you know. So I'm not, because it's odd that he didn't have a name tag. He had the only thing I could tell is that he had a stack of ribbons. Air Force gives ribbons and medals for just about anything, but he had silver jump wings is the only thing I can recall. So other people I've talked to in the military community are still active, just trying to get information. And now they know because I've came out. They were saying that if it was an Air Force officer, that has to do with someone Air Force intelligence, because a lot of them had jump wings, and that's kind of the thing that they like to do. He says it's because he didn't have any pilot wings or nothing that would signify he was a pilot. It was just those silver jump wings.
Yeah.
Just with the parachute, and they had the wreath that come up like this. That's the only thing. And obviously he had the silver oak leaves on his shoulders. But so after dealing with that, it's like, okay, signed it. I'm like, great, just fucking leave it behind. The rest of my career, don't tell anybody about it. Didn't tell my family. I told my dad before I ended up getting out of active duty and going reserves. I said, there's something I got to tell you. And he even told me this, when I started coming out publicly about it, and after I had gotten through the right part of the government to go ahead and proceed with this. And now he understands what I was trying to tell him, because I said, I just have to wait for the right time to do this, because I don't know. I'm kind of freaked out, something. And at that point, 2017, is when I met Dr. Greer, and then fast forward to recently in April, making this happen with the government and telling them and testifying and briefing them what's going on. So the flack that I'm seeing with this is, there was a guy, apparently it was a Marine that came out with Dr. Greer that was like more than 10 years ago. I think his name was Joshua or something like that. And he was a Stinger operator, so he was like an anti-air gunner, if you want to call it that. I don't know the MOS. But apparently he was in South America and he witnessed a crash retrieval. And so he stated the same thing. This paramilitary organization kind of looked very similar. Obviously, this was in the 90s, so they didn't look that dissimilar to what I saw. But he talked to a paramilitary organization. He talked about the noise that this craft made that he saw that was shot down, had a hole in it. So it was a guitar amp, because that's the only way to describe it. If it's reverse engineered, it's going to mimic the same kind of technology that these actual crafts have, right? This paramilitary organization, well, yes, that's how they operate. They're not going to be identified in any kind of way. It's going to be a generic black uniforms and gear. So, of course, and, everybody's like, oh, at least the Reddit that I'm seeing, and I said, oh, the Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. Okay, that's another thing. And it probably wasn't the same guy, but the same method. There's only one word that comes to that. It's called corroboration.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time that this guy's saying it. It's not the first time that other people have said this. But the thing is, people only pay attention to them when stuff's thrown in their face, such as what I'm doing and what these other people are doing. There's going to be people who are going to come out after me who are going to talk about the same thing. I know I'm not the only one. And maybe I can get one of my Marines, that were there to actually come forward, and maybe, ideally it'd be all of them, but I know how this goes. And one guy responded when I had these government officials and Dr. Greer trying to bring one of them forward, and he said absolutely not. He sent a text message saying it's not worth the risk to my family, my life, my career, because he's still in the military. He's a commissioned officer now. And he was very repetitive about that, and he says, don't ever ask me to do this shit again, and you need to get the fuck out of whatever you're in. But it's the response that when I asked him to do this, and that's what he responded to, what else could it be?
Yeah.
So in a sense, that kind of corroborates it, but it corroborates the seriousness of how they're in fear of their life.
Yeah.
The other guy, I didn't hear from anything. And even taking my social media down, because after I started coming forward, I just don't want people blowing up my fucking inboxes, trying to ask me details or questions or try to get interviews. I'm not about that. I'm not, the fact that our lives are kind of coming to hell to a degree because of being pursued with these helicopters and things like that. There's other ramifications that may happen that I'm not aware of, but you know what? There's a risk to things, and that's how this is going to happen. And if that's what's chosen, then I just got to figure out how to mitigate that as well.